Anton is a young man, treading on his life path in post-revolutionary Ukraine. His experience seems to have been dominated by trouble lately, but he manages to spread his shoulders and show himself as someone who has all the resources and abilities to face every difficulty coming his way. His grandpa seems not to think this way, however. One morning, he makes a stop at a gas station and exits his SUV to get some hot chocolate for Anton and himself. Upon returning, he realizes that the young man isn't in the car anymore. Naturally, there are a number of safe things he might be doing, but the old man falls into fear immediately and starts tramping around in search of him. He finds Anton smoking by the side of the road. In the conversation that follows, he almost jokingly expresses that he can take care of himself. But he's also reminded that in the past, he failed to remain true to the same promise. Starting now, his mood is somewhat altered. Later that morning, he asks his grandpa to drop him off in town, but wants to see his mother. But as it seems, the old man is strongly against this prospect. We don't know yet what he did in the past that is connected to the town, but he tries to assure the senior that he's better than his old self, and that he can be trusted again. Anton's pleading is taken into consideration. He is given some cash, and full of gratitude, he exits the SUV. Remaining true to his word, he visits his mother in the next scene. The woman is delighted to see her boy, and from her expressions, it is evident that the two haven't met in a long time. The apartment is one big mess, and as the conversation becomes gradually more meaningful, we learn that Anton's father, Ira, has been drafted into the military, even though he was sick. He seems to have been taken to the anti-operation zone, a place about which Anton knows nothing. Overall, he seems to be quite ignorant of the political news in his country. With an anxious smile, his mother restlessly frees some space. The dialogue that follows emphasizes how worried and hurt the mother is that her son scarcely drops by. He doesn't even call, and as a result, the woman has no idea what is going on in his life. He forgets some stuff too, for instance, the fact that Anton broke up with his girlfriend a year ago. For some reason, the apartment smells unbearably. The duo go out to have a smoke, and the woman becomes thirsty for some beer. When her son intends to go and get some tea, she asks for some cash and walks away to get some beverages. It is understandable why Anon's grandpa has been raising the kid since he was 8 years old. When his mother disappears from view, the young man stands up and decides to leave her. He seems to be planning to do something he won't share with his grandfather. That night, before 9 o'clock, he's crouched outside a club, petting someone's dog. A girl whose name is Katia comes out for a smoke, and since Anton is the only one outside with a lighted cigarette, she approaches him to ask for a light. The lives of these young people seem to carry a heavy, dreadful load, and even though the girl tries to have a cheerful conversation, this tendency sucks up the majority of light from the moment. Katya soon learns that Anton cannot get inside due to some past trouble and prefers to hang out outside because of the effects of alcohol, or perhaps thanks to some deeper, immediate connection. The girl begins telling a story that is deeply meaningful to her. It is her grandparents who seem to have had true love. After a few seconds of remembering, the girl finds herself oversharing and stops the conversation positively, but abruptly. Even though she seems to have no intention to communicate with another person for a while, Anton feels a sort of gravity that draws him near this person. He wants the conversation to continue. Forthcoming, he offers her to get away from here and eat something together. But sadly, Katya seems to be with somebody else. Anton doesn't want to be rude, so now he's the one stopping the conversation abruptly. The same thing happens as before, but now in reverse. Sensing a strong gravity, the girl asks him for his number and learns that the young man has no telephone. She can have his address, though, and if she ever wants to see him, she should come by anytime. After a few hours, he arrives at a bus stop where his grandpa is waiting for him, and together they drive to Anton's childhood home. His room is left untouched, and everything is the same as before. The atmosphere should bring at least a glimpse of relief and warmth, but Anton prefers to sleep on the couch. He seems to have been a musician, both in the distant and immediate past, but now he finds himself putting his old music sheets in the fire. The next morning, we get a clearer glimpse into Katya's life as well. Looking over to a gray neighborhood, she draws her cigarette melancholically and gets back inside her apartment, where a sorrowful but soothing song is playing. Over the sound of this music, she gets back into her room, where her boyfriend Johan is just waking up. The young man doesn't speak Ukrainian, so he wants to know more about the song. If there ever was some kind of attunement between the couple, it seems to be completely lost. The song is about a poet who hides his talent so that the Soviet regime doesn't take his life. Katya tells the story of an artist who fell into desperation and conformed to the regime, instead of fighting for something deeply meaningful. To her, this subject seems to be connected to something more important that she can't quite put into words. It is sort of an organismic, melancholic experience that has been underlying her life. The boyfriend fails to grasp even the slightest glimpse of it, though. Indifferent, he prefers to go about his usual daily routine instead of discussing something meaningful. It might be due to the cultural difference, but there seems to be something more to it than that. When the two enter the kitchen and continue arguing there, we somewhat understand what it is. The man seems to have preconceived ideas about Ukraine and its people, and instead of attending to little details in the present moment, he addresses those beliefs in his everyday life. Consequently, he fails to notice what is really going on in his relationship, and to avoid taking responsibility, he blames it on Katya's Ukrainian blood. From the conversation, we also learn that he plans to take Katya away from this country to a better place, where everybody does what they want. Meanwhile, the grandpa hails the sun during his morning yoga routine. The atmosphere is as peaceful as it gets, until the old man hears chainsaws cutting trees in the distance. This morning, he doesn't want his grandson to leave the house. He believes it is better for the young man to stay away from temptations and remain put. Anton is deeply troubled by this. Even though his grandpa harshly claims that he won't let him leave, the young man decides to stand up for himself. The rules have changed, and the way the old man behaves is based more on his own outdated beliefs than on the reality of the situation. Finally, Anton manages to make him reconsider. After a few minutes, we understand why the grandpa was so eager to make Anton stay. Together, they drive to a large truck, where the people who have been illegally chopping trees are going over to their next target. Here, we learn that the old man shouldn't be fooled around with. A young man who decides to confront him underestimates how much he's capable of. But for some time, the grandpa remains calm. Before he can shift gears and get in control of the situation, Anton tries to intervene. A young man who is trying to intimidate the old man recognizes his old classmate and warns him to take grandpa's words seriously. He should drop what he is doing and leave the reserved territory, since the old man means business. He has contacts with rangers, cops, and people from the town council. Another, seemingly more reasonable man approaches them then, and when the grandpa is convinced that they are about to be attacked, he walks out of his SUV, gets a shotgun from his back seat, and scares the two away. He considers this wood his home, and he will protect it with no warning. In search of something that is missing, and in search of a person who seems to be looking for the same missing piece, Katya gets on a bus that afternoon. Approaching a gas station after a while, she notices Anton walking along the road alone and asks the driver to make a quick stop. This happy coincidence stretches smiles on both faces. After a brief reunion, Anton invites Katya to have some tea, and together they go back to the gas station, where the grandpa is waiting for his grandson. When he sees Katya for the first time and is introduced to her, we learn his name. It's Huri, and for the first time, we see a glimpse of a half smile on his face. Still, he doesn't speak with Katya throughout both the introduction and the drive back home. The girl is impressed by the place in the next scene. Quietly, she treads along the yard and notices the enormously peaceful atmosphere encompassing the residence. Not much is said as she looks around the interior as well. She notices walls full of paintings and recognizes the artist. Here, after being pleasantly surprised by her sophistication in this area, Anton learns that she attended art school. He listens to her as she explains why she left. Viewing herself as talentless, she wanted to burn everything she had created. Anton doesn't try to come up with cliché motivational speeches here. Understanding her point of view, he says that it is all right to realize you have no talent for something, and invites her over to the kitchen to prepare some tea. Now Katya is the one being pleasantly surprised. Standing in front of him, she finds herself wanting to talk more. Every job she picks up ends with her realizing that her only talent is never finishing anything. Even simple occupations like riding a bike seem difficult to get around with. Anton sees something positive in this. Katya has no extremes, and in a way, she is a well-balanced individual. This makes her laugh. The dinner that follows is filled with underlying conflict that, from time to time, emerges on the surface to disrupt pieces. Katya listens to the old man, going on and on about the tales of the war, and she sees how, in the process, Huri tries to belittle his grandchild and his ability to be heroic. Catching this, Katya decides to change his mind by lying about how she met Anton. She mentions them meeting in downtown Kiev, where he saved her from a stray dog ambush. And with this, she opens up a whole new level of conversation. Starting now, the conflict between Anton and Huri becomes much more evident, and again, Katya is the one trying to set it out. She asks the grandpa about the original paintings hanging around the house, and, delighted, The old man prepares himself to dive into the magnificent past. Anton is impressed with Katya's ability to read the situation. Perhaps this is her main talent. In the next scene, the sun is already set, and Katya continues to hang up on her boyfriend, who's been trying to get in touch with her throughout the entire day. The conversation about this subject lets us understand more about her relationship with the man. He seems to be a German photojournalist who came to Ukraine to document the revolution of dignity. The day after tomorrow, she will follow him to Berlin and start a new life there. For some reason, she finds herself wanting to speak less about this matter. So she asks Anton if he ever traveled outside Ukraine. He never had a chance, as it seems. Here, we learn much more about Anton. As he openly shares, he struggled with alcohol and narcotics for a long time. It seems to have gotten to a point where he had to be put in a psychiatric hospital. But now he's been clean for 9 months, 2 weeks, and 3 days. Now we understand why his grandpa acts in a controlling manner, and why he tries to avoid entering clubs. While having the conversation, the couple seems to connect on a deeper level. They are not merely exchanging information. In a way, they share how lost and alone they are in the face of life's ambiguousness, and how, in a way, there seems to be some underlying bittersweet aspect to that loneliness. Katya decides to stay for the night. In the following scene, the two have a morning smoke and prepare black tea. Not much is said, but illuminated by the sun, they both seem to enjoy each other's company. Frankly, not much needs to be expressed in words. Silently standing in front of one another, Katya and Anton are absolutely sure that they are where they should be. That afternoon, with the help of Anton, Katya tries to get rid of her fear of falling. Learning how to ride a bike isn't as crucial for her as learning how to get rid of an instinct that urges her to quit doing things that are painful. Over and over again, she fails and fails as Anton urges her forward, until they both hear cracking noises coming from the distance. The girl is intrigued by this, and as they discuss the subject of Hryhori's brave standoffs against the illegal tree cutters, they return home. Katya seems sad that she has to leave this house. She would gladly spend the rest of her days in Ukraine here, and perhaps, by some celestial intervention, an unexpected thing happens that postpones her departure. Hryhori suddenly falls unconscious and has to be taken to the hospital. This abrupt attack is unexpected, since the old man has been as healthy as a horse since Anton can remember. As the old man is treated by doctors, the couple spends the entire day together. The next morning, Katya realizes that her flight is today. She has to leave, but so much has changed in 3 days that she finds herself reconsidering moving to Berlin. Instead, she desires to stay with people with whom she feels attuned, at a place that reflects her inner self. When Anton hears about this decision, a different thought appears in his mind. He believes that this sudden turnaround of hers is determined by her tendency to please others. She wants to save Anton. There is a part of the universe that is merciful, and she wants to be a tool in the hands of that demon. This is exactly why Anton knows that Katya deserves to be with someone better. With incredible depth, he goes on about how their relationship will progress. Detailing every single major event, he emphasizes how great it is going to be at first, but how quickly all will change. He is an alcoholic, and he doesn't trust himself with a gem of a person like Katya. He knows how miserable she is going to be, and what kind of compromises she will have to make. She will urge him to go back to music, but Anton doesn't view himself as a genius to be rescued from trouble. He sees himself as a chronic substance in need of special care. He speaks of so many details, and he shows the future in such vivid and dark colors that Katya finds herself grabbing her coat and moving away towards a window. She realizes that all the stuff Anton has said about learning to fail and trusting the process of development is a lie. Remaining silent, Katya exits the hospital room, leaving Anton alone with his heroic grandpa. For the time being, our attention is taken away from the main conflict of the story. Struggling to get used to his current condition, Hryhori makes Anton's life a little difficult. Acting resistfully, he asks his grandchild to lay him near a window and fetch his shotgun. Now that he feels weak, he's starting to get paranoid that they are going to be ambushed by the people who've been cutting trees. Fully in Anton's hands, he doesn't feel safe. Suddenly, after the young man escapes his grandmother's paranoia, he sees 2 military men entering their front yard. Anton is called into active duty. He is to go over to the commissariat tomorrow and draft into the army. The young man is extremely close to the edge, and not much is needed to push him over the cliff. That night, he slips back and enters the club, where he sees Katya's picture and an advertisement that she is renting her apartment. Like a true regular, he is greeted by the crowd cheerfully. In a little while, he has a conversation with a DJ out on the balcony. The latter seems to have wanted to never see him here again. Viewing Anton as a true talent, he knows that his prowess is inhibited here. Going back inside, Anton learns Katya's number from the bartender, looks over to the raging party, and has his first drink in 9 months. He needs only a few seconds to make himself home. It is after a few hours that we see him lying on concrete in the middle of a road, calling Katya for help. As it seems, Katya hasn't left for Berlin. We see them together in a bus in the next scene. Quietly, they make their way towards Katya's apartment and make out in the elevator passionately. After a while, the two are lying in her bed. No words are spoken, only the beating of hearts. Anton seems happy and pleased when they begin conversing about Berlin. Katya feels as if she's in the right place in his company. For hours, they act as if there is no worry in the world. But suddenly, Katya's face is flushed. She seems to be remembering the last time they spoke in the hospital and is intrigued by what is going to happen next. It is here that she learns about Anton being drafted into the army. Her expressions turn even darker, and she sits up away from Anton. A diverse palette of emotions is interchanging with one another on her face as she continues to think about the information she was just given. Katya wants him to stay. They can still devise some plans. They can go to Poland, or Anton can hide in her apartment for a while to postpone his departure. The future soldier, however, doesn't want to discuss the possible ways to avoid going into the army. We see him going back home in the next scene. Thanks to Hurry's carefulness, the door of the house is locked. Only the window upstairs is left hanging open, and the young man decides to get inside using a ladder. When he reaches the top of the ladder, the shot is fired, and Anton doesn't get to hear the gunshot. Only now do we get to go back a few hours and hear how his last meaningful conversation ended. To Katya, he shares his deepest beliefs. Since he was 14 years old, he's been trying to quiet the futile urge to discover individual music in himself. And alcohol were the only things that helped him in this endeavor. Just like everybody else, he is a ghost, and no futile search for personality will ever change that. Perhaps his passing wasn't a coincidence after all.